This video I'm making right now has a purpose, and that is for everyone to help me decide which of these 4 matchups I should pitch to Liam and Sam for my Kickstarter tier. I made a community post earlier in January asking which of these 4 matchups I should pitch. I want all 4 of these matchups for different reasons, and I figured that I'd explain myself as to why I think all 4 of these episodes are deserving of becoming full episodes of Death Battle. After this video, I implore anyone who's interested in casting a vote to go into my community tab and let me know which one sounds the best. Whichever one of these matchups has the most votes by the end of February will be the one I end up pitching to the crew. Without further ado, let me begin telling my dreams of what episodes could exist. Imagine looking at all of existence and thinking, why? If I had the power, I would reshape this reality and create something so much better. Whether it be for the betterment of all of humanity, or the benefit of only myself. Which route would you choose if you had the power? These 2 monstrous beings have asked that question and tried to shape reality in their own image. These characters are... Yhwach versus Zamza. Connections. They are both deities who believe they own the world, wanting to destroy the world as it is and recreate it based on their own ideals. They both have an almost perfect way to see the future. They both were tied to the main character in a major way, Zamza being Shulk's soul, and Yhwach being a sort of spiritual father to Ichigo. Both had to absorb other deities in their universes to become more powerful, Zamza absorbing Maineth and Yhwach absorbing the Soul King. And lastly, they were both killed by getting cut in half by the main protagonists. Yhwach being killed after having his godlike powers nullified by an arrow, and Zamza after Shulk's Monado gained the ability to kill gods. They are both very similar characters, but the real meat of this fight is that they both want to recreate their worlds into very different things. Yhwach wants a world with no death or pain, and Zamza wants a world based off of death because that's what will sustain his own life. When people made from the Bionis die, they become ether, which will sustain Zamza's life. The other reason this is such a fun idea is the fight, and oh boy, there's a lot to cover. Now, this is a really hard fight to call. Let's start with what they both can do. Yhwach can have any of the Sternritter abilities since they were all abilities taken from Yhwach's soul in the first place. And Zamza can use any ability Shulk can use since Zamza directly came from Shulk's soul, and is the master of the Monado. Let's start with Yhwach. He is a Quincy, meaning he automatically has the ability to control Reishi in many ways. He can shoot arrows from his palms or create bows for greater strength. He can manifest a Reishi broadsword that can crush enemies as strong as Captain Yamamoto, the captain of the 13-Corps guard squads at the time. He can heal himself by absorbing the Reishi around him. He has an ability called Sankt Alter, which creates an area where if he traps an opponent in this area, he can siphon off and steal their power. Yhwach has a type of precognition where he can see any possible future, and he can use his power named Almighty to adapt to any future he wants to see and assure it comes true by taking certain actions or setting traps. It should be noted, however, that this Almighty ability has been bypassed before. He couldn't see Mimihagi's hand take the place of the Soul King, and he couldn't see past Aizen's illusions. Saying this though, if Yhwach dies, he can just alter the future to revive himself, or even make events happen in any future no matter what happens in his own timeline. He can see and understand any ability, and after he understands someone's powers, they can no longer touch him. He can absorb any being and add their abilities to his own. He has an ability called Blut, which will either strengthen his body's defense or offense, but he isn't able to increase his offense and defense at the same time. He can increase his defense further by using Blutvein Anhaben, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, which creates a force field that absorbs the Reishi of anyone or anything it touches. After he absorbs the Soul King, he gains plenty of other abilities, like creating a bunch of weak black creatures to attack attack the Serite, reshaping environments like how he transformed the Soul Palace into the Quincy headquarters, can create dimensional portals and even merge worlds together like he was going to do with the Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the World of the Living. On top of all of this, Yhwach can also use any Sternritter ability. Some highlights include the Compulsory, where Yhwach can connect his veins to another person to control their bodies or crush them almost instantly. The Miracle, which lets him heal from almost anything. Create a new body for himself and essentially make anything possible. The Visionary, which turns anything in his imagination into reality. And the X-Axis, where he creates a type of bullet that will automatically pass through anything between him and his target, meaning it is impossible to deflect. All Yhwach has to do is see an area and bullets will appear. It's almost impossible to dodge. He can do much more, like controlling fire, turning his body into iron, or even commanding zombies, but none compared to when he stole Yamamoto's Bankai, Zanka no Tachi, which can do many things. This Bankai can focus every flame into the tip of the blade to disintegrate anyone it touches, can summon an army of possibly trillions of soldiers to fight for him, can send heat waves through the entire world, and can create a heat shield that will melt anyone who tries to hurt or touch him. Yhwach is stacked, that's for sure. But what can Zamza do that could possibly compare? Zamza is also very impressive. He wields a Monado and gains his insane power by essentially stealing Shulk's soul. So I believe anything Shulk can do, theoretically Zamza could do as well. Some things include the Monado Shield, which is a shield that will deflect attacks of equal strength or higher. Monado Purge, which can seal an enemy's aura. The Monado Eater, which removes buffs, deals damage, and inflicts bleed. And the Monado Armor, which protects both physical and ether damage. Zamza can see and alter the future, regenerate from almost any fatal injury, control beings called Telethia, can negate regeneration, has many fire, ice, water, earth, dark, and lightning abilities, can poison, paralyze, debuff, can destroy a person's soul, can bind an enemy in place, can force an enemy to share the damage he takes, steal someone's HP, possess other people, fly, absorb people and ether for power, can nullify abilities, can bypass people's invulnerability and durability, can absorb energy-based attacks, teleport, control people's minds, reflect attacks, can create pocket realities, can send people to a memory space where they have to fight their past memories, can resist pretty much everything, can create beings called Zamza Guardians from nothing, shoot many forms of energy, and has an ability called Black Hole after he transforms into his final godly form. This black hole doesn't really seem like a black hole at all, just a strong attack. The last thing I want to mention is that Zamza can control the Bionis, which is a giant robot that comprises half of the world in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It has a massive sword that can harm immortal beings. Zamza is just so busted. But so is Yhwach. Their fight would be legendary. There are so many things that could happen in this fight, so here are my top 3 moments I'd love to see. We need to see Yhwach summon his Quincy so they can fight the Telethia or the Zamza Guardians. Let's turn this into a crazy army type battle. I want to see either Zamza or Yhwach, or even both of them, get confused as to why they can both see and manipulate each other's futures. And lastly, I want a scene where they both are powering up by absorbing their minions. Zamza absorbing the ether from beings on the Bionis, and Yhwach absorbing his Quincy's Reishi, with the scene showing both of them on opposite sides of the screen, with Zamza's side showing streams of green energy and Yhwach's side showing streams of blue energy. That's just scratching the surface of what we could see in this fight. They both have crazy and insane powers that could be deal breakers on their own. But the last thing I need to see is the winner absorb the other being and recreate the world at the end of the battle. They both have shown they can absorb godly beings, so I think they can both absorb each other. With everything they can do, it's hard to call a winner, so let's get into who I'm rooting for and who I think wins. I'm rooting for Yhwach, because I believe he is fighting for a more just cause than Zamza, and I just generally love Bleach. But I think Zamza wins the fight. At the end of the day, everything I talked about doesn't really matter. They both have so many abilities and so many resistances that they could end up being dead even. That is until you think about Zamza's mental manipulations, which is something that, at least in the manga, led to Yhwach's death. Well, the mental manipulation and the fact that Zamza is generally stronger, faster, and more durable. For two people who can see all of reality at once, they are really hard to kill. Yhwach has the ability to manipulate time in a way where he's able to transfer events from another timeline where Ichigo's Bankai was already broken. Zamza does not have that ability of time manipulation, in my opinion. I think Zamza just edges out in stats and mental manipulations, although it can be very debatable if you ask me. Definitely the closest fight on this list, I think. It is possible that there are universes running parallel to ours with minor and drastic differences. In that universe, maybe Apple didn't take off and another company took their place. Maybe McDonald's was still big, but was dwarfed by Burger King. Or maybe we exist, but we aren't the same gender, race, and we didn't even share the same life experiences. Even if they were us, they wouldn't be us. With these two though, they may be drastically different than their iconic counterparts, but they kept that heart of gold and their good nature. These two characters are... Rivet versus Blaze. These two are the other dimensional female counterparts to both Ratchet and Sonic. They both fight alternate dimension versions of their counterparts' rivals, Dr. Eggman Nega for Blaze and Emperor Nefarious for Rivet. Both were very standoffish and untrusting people before characters from the alternate universe softened their edges and helped them to trust others. Cream helping Blaze and Clank helping Rivet. In both series, the main and alternate universes teamed up to rip holes in both of their dimensions, and they both helped different groups to overthrow the villain's rule and tyranny. Blaze joining the Freedom Fighters and Rivet helping the Resistance. For a matchup, these connections are crazy good. Comparing this to Blaze's other opponents, yeah, this is her best option in terms of connection. But how is the debate? Let's explore that. Let's start with Rivet, because she's the obvious underdog. She should scale pretty evenly to Ratchet. So I'm going to scale her to what I believe Ratchet's stats would be, which with equipment should have her power from city level to large star level without the Rhino. This is because Ratchet would scale to the Landstalkers from Ratchet Deadlocked, which are said to have enough power to destroy small star systems. Just to back up this statement, here's the quote in-game in Ratchet Deadlocked. Dallas, who is one of the announcers of the Dread Zone in that game, says, "It has power steering, AC, jumbo-sized drink holders, and enough plasma mortars to destroy a small star system." Keep in mind that Ratchet defeated 5 of these in one mission. With the Rhino, she should be anywhere from universal to multiversal, since the Rhino 8 can be seen to affect other people's universes. But the higher scaling from that argument can be kinda shaky. Her speed should be around faster than light, while her reaction speed should be much higher. Ratchet can dodge laser fire and can fly his ship through an entire galaxy in seconds. For durability, Ratchet can survive blasts from a hypernova, which is the energy of 100 supernovas. She could be quite impressive with scaling, but one thing you can't give her from Ratchet is his arsenal. She should only be given weapons from Rift Apart, so let's start going over those. She has her generic burst pistol, which can shoot 1 to 3 rapid fire shots at a time. The Enforcer, which is an energy shotgun. It can be upgraded to leave shards on enemies that will also explode after a moment. The Shatter Bombs, which are pretty generic bombs, but they leave the same shards as the last weapon. Mr. Fungi, which is a living mushroom that will come out and help you fight for a few moments by throwing energy balls from their hands. When they disappear, they turn into toxic clouds that will damage enemies. The Negatron Collider, which shoots a continuous laser beam and does massive damage and can disintegrate enemies and projectiles. The Ricochet, which shoots a bullet that can continuously ricochet off of enemies about 5 times. The Topiary Sprinkler, which is a, well, sprinkler she places into the ground. When enemies are nearby it can turn them into a topiary bush and root them into the ground for a moment. The Void Repulsor can create a shield to protect Rivet. This shield can also be shot into an enemy. The Drill Hound shoots a robotic drill that will burrow into the ground and then pop back out to blow up an enemy. The Buzz Blades shoot multiple blades that can bounce off and home in on enemies. The Warmonger can shoot multiple homing missiles on an enemy that can explode into smaller blasts. The Glove of Doom summons multiple tiny robots to try and bite the enemies. The Headhunter is a sniper rifle that does massive damage, can disintegrate foes, and shows her an enemy's weak point. It can even create weak points after one shot. The Bombardier are drones that fire missiles at targets below them. The Lightning Rod shoots lightning bolts into a target. These bullets can electrocute nearby foes, home in to an extent, and can be charged up to fire a shockwave. She has the Cold Snap, which can shoot a blast that freezes enemy in a cube of ice. An ice cloud can be left behind to also freeze foes. The Black Hole Storm, which despite its name doesn't seem to have anything to do with the black hole, is a Gatling gun that can make enemies explode when they are killed by it. The Bouncer, which shoots out a bomb that will blow up into smaller bombs that will create smaller explosions. The Pixelizer, that will shoot a blast that turns enemies into pixels. And the Rhino 8, that, like I said before, can open up portals to other dimensions and drop objects and people. Those are all of her weapons. But she also has her many gadgets, like the Omni Glove. This glove has a grappling hook that can swing off objects and pull herself towards dimensional rifts. This glove also gives her the Phantom Dash, which lets her dash in any direction and make after images. She's also intangible while dashing. She can run on walls, has the Glide Boots that let her glide. She has the Hover Boots, which lets her glide over the ground quickly, and the Magna Boots that let her stick to metal surfaces. Rivet also has Kit, who can transform into a giant warbot that fires homing missiles and flies. Rivet also has a ship, but I'm unsure sure if it has any weapons on it. Rivet, I think, stands more of a chance than people think, but let's go over Blaze to see if Rivet would really be able to claim a victory over this fire goddess. Blaze scales pretty well to Sonic during the events of Rush, but I don't think she would scale to Sonic after that game in the timeline. I think this because even though she is in Sonic Generations, there's nothing indicating her speed was comparable to Sonic's, whose speed was restoring time to all of these locations he was running through. Even still though, in terms of power, before the Soul Emeralds, she's probably on par with Rivet's weapons, if not a little bit weaker. Blaze can contend with some of Eggman's bigger mechs and fight Iblis, if you consider that canon. Some of Sonic's enemies have been scaled to planetary, so I'd say that's a good spot to scale her to. Stronger than Rivet's normal weapons, but not the real heavy hitters she has. Her speed, however, is a different story. I calced Rivet to about FTL, and Blaze at base would either be FTL plus or above. I'm not sure where you'd cap her by the end of Rush 2, but she is certainly faster than Rivet. Blaze can even increase her speed with a fire boost or a burst dash, which is a flaming version of Sonic's spin dash. In fact, Blaze can control the element of fire in some creative ways. She has the Fire Claw, which is her version of Sonic's homing attack. She can summon pillars of flame, thaw herself and others out of ice, can negate and erase fire-based attacks and creatures, glide by erupting fire out of her feet. She can upgrade this to the Axis Tornado, which creates bigger flames that propel her into the air. Blaze doesn't seem as impressive as Rivet in terms of arsenal, but Blaze should be much faster, so even if you do believe Rivet's weapons would be stronger, Blaze would still be very hard to hit and could probably get around Rivet's more straightforward weaponry easily. This whole debate gets flipped on its head when you include the Soul Emeralds though. These emeralds would give Blaze the ability to go between dimensions easily, and turn into Burning Blaze, which would up Blaze's speed and power immensely and give her full flight. Her power should be universal to multiversal in strength since she was able to fight the Egg Chameleon, which threatened both Sonic and Blaze's dimensions. Her speed should be immeasurable since later on, Sonic was able to hurt Solaris, a being who existed at every moment at every time all at once. Even though I don't think she's as powerful as Super Sonic at that point, immeasurable is still a good spot to scale her at. This form does have a time limit, but with such an increase in power, it would be hard to survive when Blaze was coming at you full force. This matchup is so interesting. So like I did before, and I will do for the rest of this list, let's talk about the top 3 moments I would want to see in this fight. Rivet needs to use all of her movement options to keep up with Blaze. I want to see dimensional grapples, hook shots, glide boots, and even standing on walls or ceilings with her magna boots. Anything to make Blaze get creative on how to close the distance. I want to see Blaze struggle to dodge the objects dropped by the Rhino. I want to see so many portals open up above Blaze that she can't possibly dodge everything. I want to see an object drop straight onto her head, leading to Blaze turning into Burning Blaze and throwing the object back into the portal before it disappears as a show of speed and power. And lastly, I want to see Kit turn into the Warbot form and fight Burning Blaze in the sky. Kit can't do much, but Rivet could support from the ground by searching for a weak point with her sniper rifle or just generally firing at Blaze in the sky, before Kit gets a hole burnt into the center of his Warbot form, leading to the final confrontation in the fight. Rivet could rebuild Kit if she wins, so it isn't necessarily a death. I just want an emotional moment. Speaking of who would win, and who am I rooting for? I'm straight up rooting for Rivet. I really jive with her story, and her arsenal makes this matchup so much more interesting. I am betting on Blaze. Even though Rivet has insane reaction speed, Rivet just gets too outstatted. It would be a fun fight, but when those Soul Emeralds come out, it's game over for Rivet, sadly enough. Beyond what we can physically perceive in our world lies another world, one where concepts like death and the afterlife are flipped on its head, as well as what we consider as a living being and the accuracy of our own memories. Creatures are known to disrupt the balance of our realities, and we need a savior, a group of supernatural beings to protect the order of our worlds. Some brave warriors who have spent their lives protecting us from dangers we've never seen might just end up in combat soon. These two being... Rukia versus Shana. These two are both part of organizations that are made to save humanity from hidden threats. Rukia is a part of the Soul Reapers and Shana is a Flame Haze. These organizations are meant to keep the balance between the human and spirit worlds. They were both picked up by figures who were part of the armies that they ended up joining. Yhwach for Rukia and Wilhelmina for Shana. These two figures would then raise them to be family. They both end up meeting and training humans who ended up being special beings. Rukia trains Ichigo and Shana trains Yuji. They both even lived and went to school with these two young men. They use juxtaposing powers, Rukia having ice powers and Shana having flame powers. But they both also use a separate magic system for additional attacks, Rukia having Kido and Shana having unrestricted spells. They have quite a bit of connections. Maybe not the most I've ever seen, but there is something here that would make a great episode. Now onto the debate. Rukia is a top tier swordsman who has some basic hand-to-hand martial arts training. She can increase her speed with an ability called Flash Step, can just naturally fly as a Soul Reaper, and it has abilities called Kido, which is pretty much just jutsu in Naruto. They are a set of abilities a Soul Reaper can learn that are powered by the user's spirit energy. She can bind enemies with two different techniques, Bakudo number 4 Hainawa, which is a reishi rope that wraps around the opponent, and Bakudo number 61 Riku Jokoro, which slams 6 rods into the midsection of a person's body that will prevent the person's entire body from moving. These two restrictive spells can also be combined for extra restriction. She has some offensive abilities as well, like Hado number 4 Byakurai, which will send a giant lightning shock from both hands, or when condensed into a single finger, can send a concentrated bolt of lightning that can pierce through an opponent's body. And then she has her favorite technique, Hado number 33 Sokatsui, which is an ability that lets the user shoot blue flames from their palms. The power of these flames are dependent on the amount of spirit energy that is put in from the user. So it can range from smaller, weaker blasts to strong enough to harm a Bankai, which is just the strongest form of the Soul Reaper. This technique also has an advanced variant called Hado number 73, Soren Sakatsui. This is essentially the same technique as before, but it's double in power. These are such a small part of her arsenal. Her real abilities come from her Shikai, a sword transformation that every Soul Reaper has. In Rukia's case, her sword transforms into Sore no Shirayuki, which is considered to be the most beautiful sword within the entire Soul Society. This is an ice-based blade that is so cold that it can start emitting a cold fog when summoned. Rukia's Shikai techniques come in the form of dances. Her first dance is called Somi no Mai, Tsukishiro. This dance creates a circle around her opponent, and after this circle is created, anything within and above that circle is frozen solid and then shattered. Hopefully there's no birds flying above when she uses this technique. Her second dance is Sugi no Mai Hakuren, which after her dance would fire a stream of ice from the tip of her blade towards an opponent, freezing anything in that direction. Her third and final dance is Somi no Mai Shirafune. This dance lets her reform her sword with ice when it's broken. It will reform the entire blade even if there are people and objects in its path, freezing anything the ice touches completely. Rukia can use any of these abilities from a distance as long as she is connected to her sword with a sort of ice rope, so she can be very unpredictable. Even though outside of these dances, her sword can still freeze about anything it touches and create ice shields. Her sword's ability doesn't freeze things in the conventional way. Her actual ability is that her sword lowers her body temperature to a point where she will start freezing even the ground she stands on. She can lower her body temp to absolute zero, but it is risky since she would have to start warming herself up slowly or her body might break. We see this when she learns her Bankai, Haka no Togami, which gives Rukia this beautiful transformation and freezes her and everything around her in a wide radius. She brings this entire area to absolute zero in seconds. This is a powerful ability, but Rukia starts to worry about her body and her hand starts to crack, before Byakuya calms her nerves, letting her defrost herself without injury. Rukia is so powerful, but how does her ice compare to Shana's flames? Let's explore that. Shana is a Flame Haze, meaning she is very skilled with fire-based attacks. She wields a blade called Nieto no Shana, which emits strong flames that can burn and incinerate foes. She wears a cloak called Yogasa, which acts as a line of defense for her as well as an infinite storage area for Shana, and rings called Cord. These rings can be filled with the user's flames and thrown to turn them into fire bolts and explosions. Even though these rings explode, they will not get destroyed, so the user can use them continuously. She has plenty of abilities called unrestricted spells that can help her in many ways. She has a spell called Guren no Soyoku, which gives her giant flaming wings that can let her fly, although there are arguments that she can't use these wings without Yuji in range. She has a spell called Guren no Odachi, which does quite a few things. It coats her sword in flames and lets her shoot fireballs, can swing a wave of fire at her enemies, and can even create fire creatures that will listen to her commands. She has an ability called Shinku, which creates a giant fire hand that will push back or kill enemies. A spell called Hien, which is honestly just another wave-like fire blast. But this one is just a bit stronger than the last one. She can use Shinpan, which creates an eye-like symbol made of fire that can observe people from far away, understand unrestricted spells, and broadcast her voice to a wide area. She can use Danzai, which can create giant streams of fire that are stronger than the ones emitted by her blade. These flames have broken past strong defenses, doors, and whole buildings. Lastly, Shana could possibly have an ability called Tempa Jasai. Why do I say potentially? Because there is a discrepancy between how this ability is used in both the light novel and the anime. The result of this is the same in both. It's a spell which summons Alistair, the being that lives within Shana's pendant that she made a contract with to gain her powers. Alistair is powerful and can do everything Shana can do and more. His flames are unrivaled by any flame haze in existence, I believe. Here's the problem. Shana doesn't use this ability in the light novel. She threatens to use it, but in the end never actually uses it. The person who does use it in the light novel, Matilda Saint-Omer, dies after using this technique because that is the condition for summoning Alistair. In the anime, Shana does use this technique pretty early on in the show, but it doesn't result in her death because she used something called the Fountain of Existence as her energy source. That wouldn't really be typical in Shana's arsenal, so I think in the end this ability would lead to her death, like it did to the other character in the light novel. There are a lot of factors to think about in this fight, but before that, let's get into what I want to see in this fight. I want to see Shana no-sell Sokatsui. I doubt those flames would do anything to Shana, and Rukia kinda likes to spam that spell in fights, so it'd be nice to see it become useless pretty early on. Shana is a lot more headstrong, and Rukia is a lot more calm. I want to see Shana start breaking through Rukia's ice abilities with her own unrestricted spells. As the fight goes on and Rukia lowers her body temperature more and more, I want to see Rukia start to stop Shana's flames and start to outmaneuver her. Once Shana gets put on the back foot, it would be cool to have her retreat and use Shimpan to observe and understand Rukia's Shikai, since it doesn't take Shana a long time to understand someone's abilities. Once that happens, we can then start to have them fighting on an equal playing field. Lastly, the ending. No matter who wins, I want them to win without their obvious win cons. If Rukia wins, I don't want it to be because of her Bankai. I want Rukia to use her Bankai in the fight, but it would be cool if Shana somehow thawed herself with her flames and slowly got close to Rukia, using one final swing to take her down while Rukia is still thawing herself. Rukia, being barely able to move, blocks Shana's blade with her sword. Rukia's blade then gets broken and she falls over, with them both barely still holding on. Shana gets on top of Rukia in an attempt to stab her, but Rukia holds up her blade, uses her last dance, and her sword then starts to reform inside of Shana's chest, causing Shana to freeze and shatter. If Shana wins, I'd want something similar. I would want Alistair to be summoned to put Rukia on the back foot, nearly killing Shana in the process. Alistair and Rukia start fighting before she uses her Bankai to freeze Alistair, but after Alistair is frozen and Rukia starts to thaw, Shana stabs Rukia from behind, again while both are on their last legs, and uses a spell to incinerate Rukia's body. Those are both pretty cool ways they could both die, but who do I want to actually win and who do I actually think wins? I'm rooting and betting on Rukia. Shana does have some advantages by being able to summon constructs. Alistair and generally her fire would have an advantage over Rukia's ice, but Shana is just outstatted by Rukia. I don't think she is stat stomped per se, but Rukia is definitely stronger and faster than Shana. Plus, Rukia is just a more level-headed fighter. Shana rushes in a lot without thinking, causing her to constantly be put at a disadvantage. I think as Rukia makes herself and the area colder and colder, Shana's fire would be less and less effective. Plus, I don't think, despite what I said before, that Shana could survive either her summoning Alistair or Rukia's Bankai. Those were just cool moments for a fight, but in reality, I think Rukia just has better win cons than Shana. Again, I think it's closer than what people say, and I would absolutely love to see it happen on the show. Now, onto my most wanted matchup. Sometimes your dreams cannot be obtained within your lifetime. It's sad, but one life just simply isn't enough to accomplish your goals, especially when those goals include total domination. But what happens when you can transcend your time? Who would you manipulate to get everything you desire? Well, none other compared to these two deadly women. These two insanely powerful femme fatales are... Kaguya versus Ultimecia. They both are beings that attempt to be a sort of god in their own worlds. They both manipulate others to transcend time and space in an attempt to bring them towards this ultimate godhood. Ultimecia taking over the bodies of other characters as she travels back in time using Elone, and Kaguya using Zetsu to manipulate Madara and to unknowingly start her reincarnation. They both also merge with a giant monster that extends their power immensely, Kaguya merging with the Ten Tails and Ultimecia merging with Griever / absorbing all of existence. These two have plenty of differences, but these connections are really freaking solid. These two fighting would be crazy, but let's start talking about the debate. Before we get into what they can both do individually, I want to go over the abilities they share. They both can teleport, fly, can see everything around them at all times, except Kaguya may have a small part at the back of her neck that she can't see, can fuse with objects or the environment, has ways to erase each other, Kaguya with the truth-seeking orbs and Ultimecia being able to absorb someone into time and space. Both can increase gravity, Ultimecia with Gravija and Kaguya with her chakra, although Kaguya is affected by her own gravitational pull when she uses her version while Ultimecia is not. Both can summon creatures to fight by their side. Kaguya can control an army of white Zetsu, and Ultimecia can turn objects like Griever into a giant and powerful monster as well as bring statues to life. They both can teleport, phase through objects, each have access to every single element, fire, water, earth, air, and electricity. Kaguya is the mother of chakra, so she should innately be able to wield every single element. And Kaguya is the strongest sorceress of all time, using spells like Blizzaga, Quake, Thundaga, and Tornado. They both can absorb the energy source they use to use these elements. Kaguya can absorb chakra and Ultimecia can absorb magic. And finally, they both can erase their own universes. Ultimecia by absorbing all of time and space, and Kaguya by using her expansive truth-seeking ball, which is said to have enough power to erase and recreate her whole universe. They can do a lot of the same things, but let's get into their differences. Kaguya can control her own hair to bind opponents, summon and move everyone to another dimension in less than a second, can stun people by touching them or even bind them with Black Zetsu, which resides in her giant sleeves, has the Sharingan, which gives her near-perfect eyesight, allowing her to predict almost any attack, and can trap people inside of a Genjutsu, which is an illusion that can be quite tricky to escape from. She can create a giant hand made of chakra to grab and bash into foes, can shoot her bones out of her hand to impale enemies, with those bones being able to disintegrate the enemy upon contact, and can morph her body into this Ten Tails form, where she becomes giant and absorbs any bit of chakra she touches. Kaguya is busted. Someone would have to be very powerful to take her down. Unfortunately, Ultimecia is just a bit more busted. Ultimecia can use unconventional spells like Holy, which is an elemental spell in Final Fantasy that I don't think would do much to Kaguya, honestly. She can poison Kaguya with Bio, can use double to increase the speed in which she casts spells, can lower her defense and harm enemies with Meltdown, can take a third of a person's health away with Maelstrom, and even stop time for an opponent. Griever is also quite a threat in this fight, if they decide to give her Griever, that is. Griever is a being heavily tied to Squall, so if he isn't there, I can see people think that it shouldn't be included in this debate, but I'll just talk about it for the hell of it. Griever can blast enemies with spells like Flare and Shockwave Pulsar, the later being Griever's most dangerous move. Can use a spell called Pain to bind, mute, and poison an opponent. Use a spell called Triple, which is just a better version of Double, and can put a time limit on a person's life with Doom, creating a visual timer above the enemy's head that will count down to a person's death. Ultimecia can junction herself into Griever. Junction is the main system in Final Fantasy VIII that lets characters learn spells and enhance stats. It's a bit more complicated than I'd like to get into because it doesn't really matter here, but she essentially fuses herself into Griever. She can do everything both could do before, but now she can summon these things called Helix. Helix alone aren't that powerful, only really being able to shoot an attack called Twin Lasers. But once Ultimecia summons one onto the battlefield, she can use spells like Meteor, which rains meteors down on a person, and Ultima, which is the third most powerful spell in the game. If she somehow manages to get two Helix on the field, she can use Great Attractor, which is pretty much the same as Ultima but ignores a person's defense. After Ultimecia absorbs all of existence, she can use the strongest spell in the game, Apocalypse. This spell is dangerous by itself, but she spams it so much in her final boss fight that it just makes it so devastating. She has a bunch of spells in Dissidia which has a questionable canonicity, but could be used for this fight. It's mostly to turn her into a Toho game, where she creates a crap ton of projectiles on stage, like different sized spears she could throw, axes that explode, arrows that rain down on someone, spears that jolt up from the ground, and swords that will stay in place before homing in on a target. These don't really change the debate in my opinion, but she could apply a lot of pressure with this alone. I'll mention these extra things as well, even though I don't think they would work well in this debate. Ultimecia can freeze time, although she can freeze people individually, so it doesn't really make a difference here. She can read and take over minds, although I doubt this would work on Kaguya. She can seal people's powers, although I think this only counts for magical abilities. And Kaguya's chakra is more of a physical source of energy. She can use protect, reflect, and create a shell to protect herself. But again, only the spells that counter physical attacks would work. Could inflict sleep, but Kaguya ain't sleepin'. Can cure herself and scan her opponents, as well as affect the individual with haste and slow, making them slower or herself faster. But with her time stop, it makes these abilities kinda useless. So they both have win cons against the other. Ultimecia could stop time, absorb Kaguya into the time stream, or just straight up obliterate her with her magic. And Kaguya could kill Ultimecia with her truth-seeking orbs, trap her within a genjutsu, or disintegrate Ultimecia with her bones. It is quite a fascinating fight, even though one person clearly seems a bit more impressive. But before I briefly talk about who I think wins, let me talk about what I want to see. I really want to see the White Zetsu try to overwhelm Ultimecia early on in the fight, causing her to fuse with Griefer. I'd want her to use Dispel and Holy on the crowd of Zetsu, wiping them all out instantly. I want Kaguya to try and start sending Ultimecia to other dimensions, with Ultimecia initially being put on the back foot but just starts overwhelming Kaguya after some time has passed. Maybe even have her absorb Kaguya's dimensions, that would be fun. And I need to see Kaguya in her monster form fight Griever and Ultimecia fuse together. The idea that this could turn into a kaiju battle is so appealing to me. With all of that, who do I think would win? I am rooting and betting Ultimecia. She's just too busted. Sure, I doubt she has resistance to Genjutsu or the truth-seeking orbs, but more often than not, Ultimecia could stop time, create an army of objects, absorb reality, hit Kaguya with so many attacks that she will just get overwhelmed, etc. I haven't looked that far into it, but they should have similar speeds if not having Ultimecia be a little bit faster. But Ultimecia should be much stronger than Kaguya. The lowest power level I've seen Ultimecia scale to is universal levels, while the highest I've seen Kaguya scale to is solar system. Kaguya just doesn't fit the same mold in terms of strength and will eventually fall to the goddess Ultimecia. Like I said before, please go to my community tab and let me know what episodes seem to be the best ideas. I'll pitch whatever matchup comes in first place. My deadline for these votes will be on February 29th. 2 days after my birthday, and I'll post the results of that community post in the description for this video. Until next time though, I'll see you all for my very first prediction of 2025. Take care.